Hi, I am Draman Touray, and I am the CEO of Pristine Consulting and Volo. Pristine is a Gambia-based software company. Volo is a Francophone regional company, fintech company. My story really starts from the Upper River region, where my father came from, a Sarahule guy from Ghana. And I was actually born in Congo because, as you know, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, a lot of Gambians, including people like Basiru Jawara, Solo Dabo, my father, they left Gambia to go and look for their fortunes. And these are incredible people, very, very hardworking, very strong, and very determined. And they lived in a very, very, very difficult environment. My own father had his entire wealth confiscated 3 times by 3 different military governments in Congo, Brazzaville, where we lived. So that was the environment in which I was born. And in the Gambia, every summer we would go back to the village Garawol for our holidays. I would put in quotation, because 5 a.m. you wake up to go to the farm, to farm. And my uncle, my dad's older brother, who was a very successful businessman, believed that putting sugar in the porridge like Rui is a waste of money. So after working from 5 till 7, you had your breakfast. So I really grew up in that environment. Around our house were always people, businessmen coming from Angola, coming from Sierra Leone, people who were just really living by their hard work. And so I was very fortunate that on my mother's side, she comes from a big Fula family, Balde family. I also had uncles who were on the intellectual side, and some of them went to very good schools in the West, in Ivy League schools. So growing up, by the age of 9, I was selling in our shop. We had multiple shops, and I would go to help out with the selling after school. When I finished school, I'll go and sell. And at the same time, I also had the other uncles who were teaching me different things about life. So I got a chance to read a lot, and I learned about a lot of very strong, hardy people, such as Robert Falcon Scott, who tried to become the first person to reach the South Pole, and he died in the process, but he kept a diary, and his story was very fascinating to me. And I also read about the first time that Mount Everest was scaled. So I had examples of people who were trying to do very impossible things. So to make a long story short, I went to school in the US and in New York City. And when I finished school, I worked on Wall Street, and I developed an architecture for the Goldman Sachs performance evaluation system, which is still in use today, which is used by the firm, thank you, which the firm uses to evaluate their brokers and also to determine the amount of bonus that they should get. So whilst I was doing that, Goldman Sachs wanted to make an investment into a new commodities exchange based in Bermuda, and they approached me, and they introduced me to this guy called Thomas Heiss, who was the CEO of this commodities exchange. So I went to live in Bermuda and architected and developed this commodities exchange, online commodities exchange. And I became very good friends with Tom Heiss. And he and I sold that first company, and then we developed a second company called RiveNet.com. And so RiveNet.com is an insurance-based startup, and we sold that company. So I was in Chicago with Tom, and we were thinking, what should we do next? I was like, let's get a boat and we sail around the world, something I've always wanted to do. So Tom like, that's a great idea. And 2 days later, he comes back, and I just wish I had the presentation, but I wanted to show you what he showed me, which is Tom is he reads a lot, and he's a very smart guy. He came back, he said, Draman, do you know that Gambia is going to undergo a huge population bulge in its youth? I was like, well, I know there is high fertility rate, but what you're saying also makes sense, you know? So he shows me this chart, which shows that Gambia is beginning a cycle of having a lot of young people. So he says to me, instead of us going and sailing around the world and doing all these things, why don't we invest in Gambia? I said, okay, very hesitantly. So, but he's a very persuasive guy. He says, you know, we could do a lot of things, but, you know, the technology side, there is nothing there. We could do things that we could never do anywhere else in the world. So we came back, we came to Gambia, and we invested initially in a technology company. And whilst we're going through this process of investment, we realized that we didn't have the talent pool, the engineers, the software engineers that we needed to build the types of applications we needed to build. I decided that the future really would belong in biometrics, especially in Africa, because we need to identify people so that we can provide them services such as healthcare, credit facilities, and things like that. So we started at that point a partnership with the Francis de Gaulle Foundation. Francis de Gaulle was a competitor of mine in high school, and when he was at MIT, I was at Columbia, and our schools used to have these hacker wars. So we would hack into their network, and they would hack into our network. And I had lost touch with de Gaulle. So one day we hacked into the MIT network, and we went into their files, and I saw that the person who owned this file was called Bur Salum. I said, Bur Salum, how is that possible in MIT? So I developed a back channel to the person, and he was the leader of their team. I was like, Bur Salum, I said, I am Bur Sin. And he's like, what? So we established that we are both Gambians. He on the MIT side, he was the leader. I on the Columbia side, I was the leader. I was like, wow, this is incredible. It's a testament to the great educational system. Yeah? It's a testament to the great educational system that we had. So we automatically knew that we have the people in Gambia that we can train to be software engineers that can build biometric identification systems. But we decided that we would need 5 years to do this. So with the Francis de Gaulle Foundation, we worked with high schools and universities. We would give scholarships to outstanding students who were very brilliant, take them through the educational system, provide them internship, and then they would come and work at Pristine. So we used that, and in 2009, we started a biometric identification platform in the Gambia called the Gambians platform. And at the beginning, everybody thought it would fail. You know, everybody. And we invested our own money. The government invested zero. We invested our own money. Initially, it was very tough, but eventually, the business started really going very well. And so as the business starts to grow well, you know, one day, you know, after some intervention, some Lebanese guy comes to my office and says to me, you know, I'm here on behalf of the business partner of the president. You all know who he is. And we want you to hand over the business to us. So, to make a long story short, and to be polite, I said, no, I cannot do that. You know? So, unfortunately, you know, this whole episode, you know, disintegrated into you know, the kidnapping of my older brother, because I was 2 steps ahead of, you know, the president, shall we say. So they demanded $400,000 in cash for the release of my brother. And a very wise old man, Basiru Jawara, told me, if you give them any money, they will ask for more. So you just have to fight. So I was very lucky. We used Facebook, SMS, technology. At that point, we had a good team of people, so we used technology to fight against the regime, but also we had support of the US government, the ambassador. So we were very fortunate. We had a very good network of people, some of whom are here. with Mr. Ngom, whose son was one of the developers that we had in our team. So after a good fight, we were eventually able to get the government to say, okay, let's have a truce and we have a settlement. But in the meantime, I was then in exile, of course, and I said, you know, whilst we are fighting Jammeh, I don't want to be distracted from my overall mission of biometrics. Let's start a new company. So we started a new company called Volo, headquartered in Senegal, and this came out of just one idea that I had that, you know, the Francophone world, they don't have credit reports. So let's introduce credit reports. So we wrote to the BCAO, they invited us. It was very tough, we didn't speak French. But just to make a long story short, after they had told us they would never work with a small company such as us, within 1 year we had a license to provide credit bureau services in 8 countries in Francophone Africa. And our platform was all developed by these young Gambians, all of it. And, you know, yeah? Thank you.